Hey guys, Mr. Hyatt here. This is the Chapter 13, first part of Chapter 13 lecture over meiosis and sexual life cycles. So, of course, we're going to start with several vocab terms. Hopefully these are reviews from past courses that you've had. But we need to have a foundation of, genetic vocab built up. That way we can apply some of this stuff, certainly in second semester when we come back and we start learning about Mendelian genetics and non-Mendelian inheritance and things along those lines. But start off with our definition of heredity. That's going to be anything that can be passed from one generation to another, from parents to offspring. Notice we've been aware of heredity for thousands of years, much longer than we've been aware of genetics and how that mechanism works. Genetics is a scientific study of heredity, so how traits are passed from one generation to the next. It's only about 150 years old. Really, Gregor Mendel launches us in the world of genetics in the 1860s. So another foundational term here, variation, is going to be differences. Essentially, any difference between two organisms are called variations in terms of genetics. We're looking at phenotypes typically, but eventually we'll get to where we'll look at genotypic variation. Offspring only resemble their parents and siblings. They're not identical matches to their siblings. That's what that point is supposed to make. Genes, remember our definition, Mr. Hyatt's working definition of a gene is something that does something. That's a stretch of DNA that codes for some sort of protein, codes for some sort of a trait, something along those lines. Locus is called, think location when you see that. That's the address of the gene, where it can be found, which chromosome number, which arm, which length, all that kind of stuff. Okay, when we define reproduction, we're talking about how we copy genes and pass them on to the next offspring. So when Mr. Hyatt says reproduction, this is what he's talking about. Nothing else, just how we copy genes. We organisms copy genes and pass them on to the next offspring. We've learned a ton about asexual reproduction already. That's basically mitosis, also known as cloning. There are quite a few organisms that reproduce asexually. One parent passes all of its genes on to its offspring. So a couple of examples here. Redwoods reproduce asexually. Hydra reproduce asexually. You see we've got a bud coming off of the parent. It's essentially like the hydra grows an arm. Then there's a pinching that happens here. This bud pinches off, floats away, roots nearby, and becomes a new hydra. So again, all of the genes go from one organism to the other. Here we've got SpongeBob, and I know you can't hear the audio, but SpongeBob reproduces via budding. SpongeBob's a sponge. He's saying, can you reproduce through budding? Can you? Can you? Can you? So, I don't know if you know this or not, but they actually staff marine biologists to try to make SpongeBob as sciencey as possible. That's kind of obviously a silly example of asexual reproduction. Advantages to asexual reproduction: you only need one parent. I'm awesome. My kid gets to have all of my awesomeness. So all those great genetic traits are conserved and reproduced. I don't have to worry about some of my awesomeness being recessive to my wife's unawesomeness or something along those lines. I think you get the idea. Disadvantages: you don't get new DNA combinations, so there are no new traits for evolution to work on. And so if I'm really well fit to my environment and I asexually reproduce, my offspring is going to be really well fit to that same environment. But if the environment then changes, my offspring is in trouble. They're not going to be able to adapt because there are no new traits to work on. So sexual reproduction, that's what we're more familiar with. That's where two parents are going to contribute DNA to one offspring. Most organisms definitely reproduce this way. We don't know for sure in some fungi and things along those lines. Most organisms certainly reproduce sexually. But like I said, there are several examples of some that do not. So in terms of advantages of sexual reproduction, the offspring is going to have a unique combination of DNA, which may be an improvement over both parents, may not be. The new combination of DNA is definitely going to be great for evolution because there's going to be new traits to work on. Of course, there are disadvantages. You need two parents. You can lose, like I said, in the sexual reproduction chunk. I'm awesome. I could lose some of my awesomeness that my kid may not get. The offspring may be less fit than the parents. Of course, it requires specialized structures. The parts have to fit together to trade the DNA to make the baby. And then finding a mate is energy intensive. Sometimes you have to be intrinsically attractive to the opposite gender. You have to have traits that they find desirable, and sometimes you have to perform specialized behaviors, and we'll pick up with this in video 2.